If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, why do so many people seem to agree that modern art is just plain ugly? Today's episode of Radio Free History is going to be the first in a series. We take a deep dive into the history of the art world and ask how it got where it currently is, but we need to start that story 500 years ago. Alright, so today we're going to do something a little bit different than our other episodes so far. If you're listening to this on Spotify or in any other audio-only format, you might be missing out because we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at art history. So I would recommend you watch this on YouTube if you can.
You're not going to believe how ugly some of this stuff is.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to see it to believe it. We really can't adequately describe how ugly some of the art we're going to be discussing today is.
Yeah. You know, have you seen Mel Brooks's History of the World Part 1? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with a kind of classic gag where, you know, the first artist is the caveman drawing a picture of a dinosaur on the wall of the cave. And then the first critic is the caveman who comes along and takes a piss on it. You know.
Human nature.
Yep.
Laid bare.
Yep. Yeah, it's within about 15 seconds. You know, that's a lesson to be taken forward for the rest of your life. But you know what? When I look around, there seems to be some sort of conspiracy theory between the artists and the critics. Like, an artist does something retarded, like leave a pile of concrete blocks somewhere, and an ecosystem of critics, collectors, professors, curators, dealers, etc. They all start talking about how, it challenges us, it pushes boundaries, it's thought-provoking, it breaks through barriers.
Yeah, that's the weird part. That's the part that always creeps me out. It's not the bad art, it's the attention that the bad art gets, and the people going to bat for the bad art.
Well, my personal favorite one of all the stupid shit they say is, we're going to start a conversation. This piece of art starts a conversation.
But
so,
you know, it's activist. And,
at
that point, it's propaganda.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but that's just it, though. Like, so if we expect the art and the critic to be at odds, enemies of each other, why is it that they seem to be essentially engaged in a mutual money laundering scam?
Yeah, it's like pro wrestling conflict going on there.
Yeah, so I mean, the criticism is almost as cliche as the art is at this point, but it gets really, really interesting when you have committees deciding who to give the government grants to, because if anybody actually wanted to buy a piece of this crap, why would they need subsidies?
Well, it's very easy in Canada. You go, who speaks French?
Yeah.
And then you distribute the art subsidies and the cultural subsidies accordingly.
Or whose art is traditional indigenous knowledge. I'm hearing that as well. I'm hearing people with French accents, white people with French accents saying, my art is traditional indigenous knowledge.
I was watching a interview with Gavin McInnes talking about when he started Vice. And to get the grant, he had to be on welfare. So that was the thing. His friend came to him and was like, look, we got this government grant lined up to make this magazine, but you got to be on welfare or we won't get it. And then he had to go and sign up for welfare. So anyway, it's Canadian culture. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, you know, that stuff is funny when you're dealing with government grants, but the private sector isn't any better. I mean, it was just announced a few weeks ago that Sotheby's Art House is paying their people their bonuses and IOUs, which means insolvency is right around the corner.
Yeah, can confirm.
Yeah. I mean, the high-end art market is something which nobody really understands, least of all me. I just know that that's the telltale sign of an asset bubble popping.
I'm always reminded of exotic derivatives. Yeah. When I look at some of how they price some of the modern art pieces.
Yep. Well, yeah, exactly. You know, you buy one of these pieces of shit for $3 million, hoping somebody else is going to buy it for $4 million, and you hope you're not the person holding the bag when the music stops.
It's like crypto.
I'm sure that'll make half of our audience laugh and half of them say, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, we did. You guys go back, watch the banking episode. Crypto's, at least there's a limited supply of some of these coins.
Well, that's what the Bitcoin acolytes will say, at least.
I'll say that. I'll get to be, you know, I'm freaking neutral on Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
No, it is limited in supply. Unfortunately, for something to be actually money, it has to be somewhat stable, and that's where Bitcoin hasn't quite found its level yet, shall we say?
Yep.
Yeah, so back to art, though. I mean, museums are the ultimate emperor has no clothes. Like, you have the old paintings, the landscapes, the portraits, pictures of royals, pictures of nobles, still lifes, heroic nudes, biblical stories, Greek myths, marble sculptures, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm always like shocked looking back at the historical art.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Well, but that's the thing. You don't need an appreciation of art history. In fact, like, I was probably that kid who hated being dragged to the museum, but you can still tell how much effort went into these old classical pieces, and then you look at the modern works in the collection, and nobody's going to tell me that you put as much work into that as Michelangelo did.
Yeah. Oh, the Pope would not pay for this.
No.
The Pope
Pope
would have excommunicated you for some of the stuff.
Yeah. Maybe there's some stuff from the 60s with like that interesting mod look with the geometric shapes, but that's even still, that's a far cry from the Sistine Chapel.
Mm.
Again, it's not only is it ugly, it just clearly requires a lot less skill. Just as an example, I Googled a random artist whose work has been on display at MoMA. I just was hoping this to be representative, so I just like Googled MoMA art exhibition, and I got a guy named Josh Smith. There's nothing special about this guy. It was just a random name that came up in a Google search for a modern artist. And the nicest thing I can say about this guy is that well-meaning fourth graders make similar art.
Yeah, it's not the high skill. I'm not like, you don't see that.
Now, and of course, there has to be some vulgarity as well. So one of his works is called "High as Fuck." Now, I just so that like you think I'm not being unfair to this guy when he's really got some masterpiece that I'm just being extra harsh on. Here is "High as Fuck" by one Josh Smith.
Oh man, see, this is a kid who needed to be bullied.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I'm sorry, you took the bullies out of the school, and this kid doesn't. He never had his head in the toilet.
Well, like, go to like some swanky private school's 5th grade art exhibition, and it looks like this. I'm sorry, it just does.
We go to OCAD right now, and we open. There's going to be 15 girls with this on their sketchbooks, something like this. It's like.
Yeah, well, this piece of work sold for something like $227,000.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and like the thing, and I'm not trying to cherry pick here. Every piece of art in this guy's catalog looked like dog shit.
There is a famous schizophrenic artist named Wesley Willis, and he did better drawings than this guy.
And he was a certifiable retard.
Was not intellectual.
He was a retard. Yeah, just get us demonetized right on the bat.
You gotta make sure you swear in the first like for 5 minutes of a video, because I don't want like normies finding this. So I'll make sure.
So the obvious question looking at this thing is, do we just not get it?
Yeah, there's a possibility. I'm too stupid to understand.
No, I'm going to put my foot down right now and say it's time to call bullshit on that narrative.
Emperor's got no clothes.
Yes. Gone are the days when you need to take Yale's art history course and probably a few Renaissance history courses as well to understand art. No, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, this is something that like out of his like loft's window.
Yeah.
He's just looking out, and he just didn't have anything else, and he just okay, just go.
Didn't have anything else, including drawing skills, technical skills.
Yeah, seriously, this is accessible. This is
something that you do like when your art assignment is due the next day and you left it to the last minute.
If I was a middle school art teacher and the student came up with this, I'd give them a B+.
Yeah, but that's you're generous, but I mean we also live in the age of grade inflation.
Yep.
Like B+ is a failure at most schools these days.
Fair.
So.
Been an A, a modern A.
So, like I said, you don't need to go to Yale and take a bunch of art history classes anymore to understand anything. All the art history you need is on YouTube. We live in an age when you can educate yourselves, and
you don't have to pay for it.
No, you don't have to pay for it. If you really want something, there was a British series 20 years ago by Simon Schama called Power of Art, which gives you enough context to enjoy the local fine arts museum, and you'll probably sound more intelligent than most waspy people who talk about art anyways.
Yep.
I'm sorry you don't need to go through some very, what's the word I'm looking for? Some very selective history program to understand the history of art just to get this. There is nothing here. I am going to call bullshit. I'm going to say this is not worth $227,000.
Whose kid is this? That's why I'm asking. If I found out that like a charitable trust that I owned bought this, I'm for that amount of money, I'd be like, whose kid is he? We're firing that guy.
Yeah. Well, also more importantly though, not only do you not need to know anything about art history, gone also are the days when you need to look at things through the lens of colonialism or intersectionality or feminism or whatever bullshit.
Yeah, you don't need to
look at this through a feminist lens. Look at it through an intersectional lens if you want. It's still dog shit.
Well, we got to look at it through a quality lens. That's what's kind of been lost. Everybody's looking through other lenses.
Yeah.
Does the boat sink? It's what you can talk all day about. How nice the captain is. You can talk about, how good the decision or how moral the boat is. If the boat sinks, it doesn't matter.
Yep. Nature has a way of giving you a pass or fail grade.
Yep.
You appreciate art, at least the real art, by understanding its historical context. Fair enough. Like Rembrandt was famous for a few years because Amsterdam was the center of the business world and businessmen wanted to throw a bunch of money at self-portraits. And for a while, Amsterdam was the center of culture and commerce, so those paintings achieved a bit of a mythical status. The more you understand about Rembrandt, the more you understand about Amsterdam, about the Protestant Reformation, the more that those old portraits make sense.
This is always the interesting part to me, and this is how my knowledge of art, it's always tied in with the culture and the history.
Well, and again, our friend Josh Smith here, what's his culture and history? I'm sure his biography is just, I went to art school. That's it. Is there any story here other than I went to art school?
I'm seeing a rich dad.
Yeah.
I'm seeing indulgent parents.
Yep.
That's what I'm reading. That's my read off this. I'm seeing just
that's probably the one who paid $227,000 for it.
And you're gonna have your parents come to your art exhibition, and you're gonna have that called high as fuck.
Yep.
Okay, at some level, this is a fuck you, dad. So he's been indulged and he's angry about it.
Yep.
That's what I'm reading, knowing that a grown man painted this and sold it.
Yep.
And named it.
And again, I'm willing to call bullshit on it. As far as I am concerned, we get it. There may be an ecosystem full of these art dealers and museum curators who are willing to buy this stuff and put it on their walls, but there is nothing there.
Yeah.
Let's just call bullshit right now. Now, speaking of bullshit, though, are you familiar with what the Turner Prize is?
It's the art prize?
It's the famous art prize in London for modern art.
Oh, okay.
But you know, it's been a meme for decades now, but let's just take a look at the four finalists for the 2024 Turner Prize. Why don't we?
Oh, God.
From Tate Modern's official website. Pio Abad. What do you think that is?
Looks like somebody's making a sperm.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Like, that's...
Pio Abad, again, this is straight from Tate Modern's official website. He explores cultural loss and colonial history. Already, this is, yeah.
Because this got me thinking about the Mohicans.
Yeah.
No, wait, it didn't. It got me thinking about sperm.
So let's find out what this is. He does drawings that transform artifacts from British museums. And what was his work? He created a gigantic replica of Imelda Marcos's necklace, which I could make with a 3D printer.
You want to know what doesn't happen to art kept in British museums? They don't get destroyed by ISIS.
Yep. Well, also, like, it doesn't get much more topical in 2024 than Imelda Marcos, the wife of the dictator of the Philippines back in the 80s.
Now, this is fascinating because there's a lot of colonialism going on right now, and it is, you know, Chinese colonialism is about to happen, I think. We got Russian colonialism, and we've got cultural colonialism right now. Is the Saudi Arabians are taking oil money, and they're using that oil money to set up madrasas all over the Muslim world and spreading their very, very unique interpretation of Islam. And
it's a very, very peaceful
way of doing things. So yeah, that's the, you know, but nobody, you know, we don't, that would be interesting. It would be interesting to hear about that. But these guys don't want to get fucking Charlie Hebdo.
Well,
so we gotta fucking go after fucking safe stuff to criticize.
Well, we're talking about safe stuff to criticize. Fine, you want to go after a brutal leader of the Philippines? Go after Duterte, who was at least in the last 10 years. Yeah. The guy who had creative ways of dealing with drug dealers.
And also Justin Trudeau.
One of the funniest videos you will see is Duterte telling his people to get vaxxed.
Yeah, that's a classic. When I think of the shall not be named, I think of this video. Go see, if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and go see it. There's certain cultures that are very libertine and you have to be very gentle with. There's certain cultures that need a firm hand. And this is an example of a firm hand in very great way.
Do you want to spoil it for it? Yeah, let's spoil it. It's we're gonna throw you in the prison cell, and the prison cells are filthy in this country.
The police never clean them. You didn't get a bunch of truckers blocking the roads or anything.
No.
You didn't get any buffalo, no buffalo hat guys.
There are a lot of Filipino immigrants in this country, and everybody is like, yeah, my parents love Duterte.
Yep. Yeah, that's like, I can confirm. And Pacquiao.
Yeah.
They love Pacquiao.
Yeah.
And they love Duterte.
Yeah. And they don't even remember Imelda Marcos.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm up. I reach it. I don't know. So. God bless you.
So this is one of the four finalists for the Turner Prize. Let's look at the next one. Is this not exactly what you would expect in a finalist for a modern art competition in 2024?
This is deeply upsetting.
Yeah.
I don't like this. This is awful. This is again, I'm reminded of like some kid's sketchbook.
Yeah. Well, let's again take a look at what it says on Tate Modern's official website. Claudette Johnson, striking figurative portraits of black women and men. She examines, get this, marginalization of blacks.
Wow.
Original, right?
It's like right out of a script. It's like it's weirdly confined. It's like.
Well, that's kind of what we're digging into here. Like, she, again, this is from Tate's official website. She draws her family and friends. Because just, God forbid, there be one cliche that this woman doesn't hit.
Now, if they wanted to be topical, Apple had a slave revolt not too long ago in India.
Mm-hmm. Yep, like 2020.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is again was it the AirPod factory?
Yeah, the earbuds. Yeah.
They stopped paying their workers, and the workers rioted.
Yeah. It's an interesting way of cutting costs when you're running a factory. You just stop paying people.
Yeah, that's just what I can just see the guy going in like, well, have you been paying them? Just stop. Just don't pay them. Save all kinds of money. Yeah, so that would be interesting. It would be interesting to see attention brought to that, but it's weird. It's like there's certain things that are emphasized and certain things that are not.
But there's just so much marginalization of blacks because that's a nice little abstract noun that nobody can define. Marginalization.
Well, also, it's hard to define black. Like you talking about like Nigerians. Because any classification system, before anyone gets upset, any classification system that puts Jamaicans and Trinidadians under the same umbrella is deeply flawed. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot of diversity, and black doesn't cover it, in my humble opinion.
So let's take a look at the third finalist for the Turner Prize. What do you think this is?
This reminds me of like the Dukes of Hazzard, but like the sad Dukes of Hazzard where they knocked the Hispanic girl off and got the Duke, the boss hog caught them in a doily net and they can't cover up their freaking hate crime car. I don't know.
Well, this woman who clearly went to art school as well.
She likes the National Health Service.
Her name is Jaslene Carr. She covered a vintage Ford with a giant crocheted doily to represent. What do you think it's going to represent?
Not the Dukes of Hazzard.
Not the Dukes of Hazzard. It's going to represent growing up Sikh in Glasgow.
All right, that's not where I would go.
No,
with this.
My dad is from Glasgow. You know what he says? Sikhs moved to Glasgow because the Pakis moved to Edinburgh. Because when the Sikhs and Pakis move to a country, they need to move to different cities.
I wish that I could say that that's not true, but like, isn't that like how Calgary and Edmonton work?
Yeah, yes it is. Do the Sikhs and Pakis in Toronto get along with each other?
No.
No, they don't.
I know, that's, yeah.
Again, the algorithm's gonna basically kill this video.
If you found this, congratulations.
Yeah. I said Packy. Oh well. And let's round this out at looking at our fourth and final finalist.
Oh God.
What the fuck do you think that is?
This looks like a Diatword video. That's what it looks like to me. It's like the South African raver guys. It looks like one of their videos.
Well, Delaine Lebas, however you pronounce that, is a gypsy who covered 3 rooms in painted fabrics.
Boo!
The Tate says she creates, quote, immersive environments.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Now, I actually hope this woman wins because there is at least some authentic cultural context with a gypsy trying to scam the government for money. So, if I were voting for anybody, I'd be voting for her.
Yeah. Go for the classic. You might as well have the gypsy run off with the loot. Always.
Yeah. Goodbye, monetization.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Sorry.
So this is it. The gold standard of art in London in the year of our Lord 2024.
This is the best thing
Yep.
to find. When I think of all the talented artists that I've known working in freaking bars over the years, and then I see this get recognition, it's deeply upsetting.
Yep.
I could throw a rock at half the bars I've worked at and hit a better artist. That's true.
You could throw a rock at the gypsy and a lot of people would be happy.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Oh, that gypsy episode's coming, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry. We're going to explain these people.
So, yeah, this is art in the current year. Nothing's original. Nothing captures the zeitgeist for future generations. Closest we have is like talking about Imelda Marcos.
Yep, that's as topical as you're allowed to get.
Nothing's insightful, nothing's satirical, all these...
Nothing's new.
No, nothing's new. All these descriptors about colonialism and immersive environments and marginalization of blacks are basically going to appear in descriptors of next year's finalists. I can guarantee you that.
Yep.
That's...
You know who loves colonialism? My Indian family. You know, the British, when I talk to my cousins overseas, they talk a lot about what the British brought, the British contributions to the culture. Like, it's not, like, really the history of a lot of these places is a history of, like, various types of colonialism. You know, really is a more honest way to look at the history of a lot of places. But, so, when it comes to comparing who did what, well, one group gave you the Taj Mahal, one group gave you a court system and museums and... So anyway, a fair reading of history is, and again, because of what happened when the British left, is another reason that, a million people died, just so we're clear.
Yep.
And my family was displaced. So that's that was the end of colonialism. That was
more people died in the first 30 years of an independent India than did during all of British rule.
Yep, I believe
it. Yeah, it took me the first 24 years of my life to understand the point of art appreciation, and I can tell you there is no art to appreciate here. None. Zero. Yeah, again, there's still artists out there who paint portraits and landscapes. Like you said, you met some of them at the bars. And if I ever come into a bunch of money, I'll be their patron. I'll get them to paint a nice seascape or some shit to put over my fireplace.
I'll be honest, I'll use AI, but...
Well, no, I don't know. I think there's something nice about having a person making personal art for you. I don't know, but...
I joke, but I would definitely pay an artist to, paint, some of the photos I've taken. Yeah. That would be awesome, but...
Well, anyways, but whatever the point is, those paintings are... that the talented people make... They're not going into art galleries.
Yeah.
It's
sad truth.
Yeah. They're not going to be resold for millions, and they're sure as shit not going to have the same cultural significance as Michelangelo did. So what the fuck's going on?
You know what the most talented painter that I ever know, that I've known in my life,
Hitler?
is doing?
Sorry.
Hitler sucked at painting, but... the most talented artist that I knew in my life, in terms of my personal life, he makes his living now painting people's pets. He started a business where he will paint your pets, and that's how he makes his living. This guy is insanely talented. So
Yep.
yeah, he's not getting in museums. So that probably someone will discover these pet pictures in 100 years and be like, oh, the genius. But anyway.
I don't know how to fix this system, but this episode is going to be about at least explaining it.
Yep. You gotta know what's wrong before you fix a problem.
But before we continue our deep dive into what art is and how it went horribly wrong, like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're not listening to this one on YouTube, you really should be, because you're missing out on all the terrible art.
You're not really gonna believe how ugly it is with us just telling you.
No.
You need to see this to believe it. I wouldn't believe me. It's that ugly.
Oh, and we've only just started. We've got more shitty art to come. Like and subscribe on YouTube wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to drop us a donation, go to either ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi/Radio Free History, or subscribestar.com/radio-free-history. If you donate to one of our higher tiers, we'll send you some merch, probably branded just like the new Radio Free History logo we have on the screen right now. Very punk 80s aesthetic.
I cannot wait to put this logo on a t-shirt or a hoodie. So please, you should give us your patronage and we'll send you something nice out.
So the biggest problem is we just don't know what the hell art is. Like all that stuff we just looked at with the doilies on the cars and the gigantic bracelets that look like sperm and whatever the hell that gypsy lady did.
So I was checking that out. There is a Die Antwoord video called Enter the Ninja that I swear to God, she just stole pieces of the set and hung it up. Like, you look at it, tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the same.
Well, again, there's some genuine gypsy context with stealing intellectual property.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point she's making. Is, you know, and this is, you know, in tricking you out of your award money. I don't know.
Well, again, the biggest problem is we don't know what art is. There is this abstract noun art, some concept which covers both that nonsense and Michelangelo and Leonardo and Monet and Van Gogh and Rembrandt and all these people. Can you give me a definition of art that would cover all those people as well as these idiots at the Turner Prize?
No, and I've been thinking about it, and I can't come up with it. It's not the same thing. Yeah. When I look at art from antiquity, I can tell it's art. No one has to explain to me it's art. I don't need to take a course to appreciate it. Intrinsically, as a human being, I know it's beautiful.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny you said that, though. I mean, because if you went back to the Renaissance and you'd said, I want to see some art, people wouldn't really know what you were talking about, because Michelangelo, he was called a painter and he was called a sculptor. This word art just wasn't really in the vernacular back then. It's actually more recent than that.
I would have never assumed that. That's fascinating.
That's part of the reason why this word is such a nebulous word, and you have all these charlatans trying to tell you that everything is art, because it's not really a timeless concept, and that's something that I actually had to learn when I was researching this episode. I just wanted to know why modern art is so hideous. But yeah, the word art is something much more recent than the Renaissance, and it was retroactively applied to the Michelangelos and Leonardos of the world.
Interesting.
And also, at some point, one activity, specifically painting, became synonymous with art. Like the word art always existed. When you talk about something being a lost art, you think about like bookbinding or cooperage or goldsmithing or, you know, in-home textile making or whatever.
It's like artisans.
Yeah, exactly. When you think about, you know, art from different cultures, quote unquote, it's just what tradesmen in different cultures do for a living, and a bunch of white academics are enthralled by it for who knows what reason. But I mean, the word art is used in other contexts as well. Like Donald Trump wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, and Sun Tzu wrote The Art of the Deal.
He didn't write it.
Well, there's a book called The Art of the Deal. There's also a book called The Art of War, written a few centuries earlier. Even the people at Subway making your sandwich are called sandwich artists.
So fun fact, they got, I was watching this prison YouTuber, and apparently they made Jared, who's in jail now for bad things, they make him make the sandwiches in the kitchen.
So Dankula just released a video about Jared from Subway a couple of weeks ago, and the #1 comment on it was, fun fact, Jared started and ended his career trying to get into smaller pants.
Okay.
If you go to a university, the faculty that gives 90% of people their degrees is the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, but honestly, these motherfuckers in the universities, they're part of the problem. Like, any art history professor can give you a story of how artists started becoming more and more free as time went on, and following the rules less and less, and throwing off these constraints until you have some Sikh putting a big doily on a car and calling it art.
Yeah. I showed that to my wife. I was like, what do you think this represents? And she was like, and then she didn't know. And I said that it represented the Sikh experience in Glasgow. And she says, well, I guess they're probably Uber drivers. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting one of these art history professors, though, to explain the history of art, the real history of art, that's like using the Bible to prove God is true. I mean, they'll give you a narrative, but
Will they ever? God.
You know, that's what I said before. We have to be willing to have the confidence to call bullshit on this stuff, because you can look at centuries of paintings. You can look at the Renaissance painters and the Flemish primitives and the French masters and Constable and Turner and all these people. Whatever they did is not the same as what these people vying for the Turner Prize are doing. So we need to, let's say, we'll investigate this. Let's say extrinsically, for lack of a better term. We need to take a step back and just look at the whole practice, look at the whole scam, and put things in proper context. So this is Casa Loma in Toronto. It's a large castle in the middle of the city. And you may be wondering, why is there a big castle in the middle of a city like Toronto? Was there some king or some prince or some noble who vacationed there? Well, no. In the early 20th century, a guy came into a bunch of money. I think he owned the power company or something like that, and decided, I want to build a castle. So he built the castle, and then he couldn't afford the upkeep on it, so he had to donate it to the city.
Yeah, and now the city has a castle.
Yep.
And if you go to the castle and take the tour, people, basically every room will be like, and this would have been bigger, but he couldn't get the funding. And there would have been a swimming pool here, but he couldn't get the funding. So it's a very Canadian story of us not being able to build infrastructure.
Yeah, there's nothing more, there's no story more Canadian than, a guy wanted to build a castle and couldn't afford it and said, fuck it.
Yep. It's a good thing we didn't need the fortifications.
Well, this dining room in the year 1910 would have been considered completely modern. In 1910, it's a little more than 100 years ago, but it's not that far in the past. And it has the aesthetic is almost foreign to anything you'd see today. It's
not getting this at IKEA.
No, you're not. You know, you got the pillars, you got the ornate furniture, you've got the piano, because if you're hosting a dinner party, you might have live music there, and not Drake, which you would have in high society if you're having a dinner party today in Toronto, which just shows you how far we've fallen.
I like that there used to be work for musicians, and now it's just
there's work for DJs.
Yeah. Oh God. I used to get into it with DJs. You get a lot of these guys would be like, I'm Mozart. Like they get this really, and I'm like, homie, you mix two people's art together. In any other aspect of life, what you do is called plagiarism.
Yeah.
Now get out of here. No, I'm not. I will unplug your laptop. And I usually edit it anyway.
Well, see, above the fireplace there's a work of art, and I guess it doesn't quite fit the rest of the decor, or at least I don't think it does. But the important thing is, in the year 1910, this would have been, everything you see here would have been considered modern, including that painting. And the painting would have been a conversation piece. Like 40 years earlier than that, it would have been some picture of a scene from ancient mythology with a bunch of naked men. And, well, these days you see that in different parts of Toronto, but 100 years before that, it would have been a portrait of the family looking very aristocratic. I mean, these days nothing's stopping you from decorating your place like this, but at the very least, you're going to look a little bit eccentric. You're going to look like Donald Trump if your dining room looks like this and there's a big aristocratic portrait of yourself above the fireplace.
Yeah, I'm going to make some assumptions if I go into somebody's home and they've got elaborate pictures of themselves. Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if I went into somebody's apartment and he was listening to Buddy Holly music and music from the 50s, it might be a little bit jarring, but there was good music from the 50s. I just might think, okay, you have some unconventional tastes for somebody in the year 2024. And that's kind of what's going on with that painting there. In the year 1910, a painting wasn't just, something you did to stroke your own ego to call yourself a patron of the arts. It really was a conversation piece that you would want to show off to people when you had high society over in this fancy dining room.
Okay.
And also, if you're an art collector now and you say you have a Picasso, it sounds, it makes it sound like you're maybe scholarly, but you have to go out of your way to get a Picasso. In the year 1910, it was perfectly normal to have a Picasso or a Renoir or a Monet or a Van Gogh if you could afford it. And these people were all either alive or they had just killed themselves, in the case of Van Gogh, depending on how tortured the artist was.
It's like a status symbol, basically.
Yeah. Well, it was a status symbol, but it was also new. It wasn't like a 200-year-old piece of art. This is something that would have been new, and it would have been in style when this was done.
This is what the kids are doing.
Yeah, essentially. Like there's nothing artificial about this. There's nothing constructed or put on in this picture. This is the context of art in the year 1910. Which again, it was more than a century ago, but it's not ancient history. It was just before World War I. Only have to go back 3 or 4 generations to have an ancestor who might have been in this room.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the context of art in the year 2008, almost a century afterwards.
Ah, my eyes!
We're not even going to talk about this monstrosity, this eyesore in the foreground yet. We're going to talk about everything in the background because we're trying to contextualize everything.
I just want to point out that balloon animals are usually done by the dumbest clown.
Yeah?
That's just, clown can't do anything else. You teach them how to make balloon animals for the kids. So anyway.
Even if it's done by the smartest clown, it doesn't belong here. But like I said, we set the stage by describing the whole scene at Casa Loma. We have to describe the whole scene here in this room. This is the opening day of an art gallery in Los Angeles in the year 2008.
Oh, God.
On the left, you see something that looks like it was a texture on Doom or some computer game in the 90s.
The lo-fi last-minute thing that they submitted. Oh, God.
In the middle, you have like 4 different paintings of the same blonde cokehead actress who wanted to feel important, so she blew some artist. Clearly the artist was like, hey, this is going to be like Andy Warhol, but in the year 2008, man.
They have a fascination with Warhol.
Well, we're probably not going to get as far as Warhol in this episode, but he's coming up. He's going to be part of the story.
You want to hear something really, like a weird spoiler?
Always.
I'm working on a pro wrestling episode, and I have to bring up fucking Warhol. Warhol went to WrestleMania and like made pro wrestling like seem like more legitimate art for a moment. It was him and Cyndi Lauper. So anyway, that's a tie-in with pro wrestling. We're already to pro.
Cyndi Lauper is a gay icon, and pro wrestling is a very gay sport.
Yeah, I grew up wrestling. I'm not going to pretend gays didn't invent it. I'm not going to pretend gays don't enjoy it. My wife's always teasing me about, you got a gay sport. And I was telling her one time, like, it's not gay, it's this deadly martial art. And we're walking down Church Street, and there's a gay, like a wrestling contest at one of the gay bars on our street. So there's just sometimes when you lose arguments when you're married, and it's just that was one of the things. So yeah, it's gay, I'll admit it. But especially pro wrestling, there's a weird fixation on an idealized male form that is perhaps best explained as a latent expression of homosexuality in some cases. Not that it's just gay, it's just there's a gay aspect to it.
It's what does it tell you when you need that many steroids to get to the idealized form, though?
Yeah, oh God.
So what else do we have in this art gallery? We have on the right a painting of a pirate, and it looks to me like the guy who painted it wants a job at Adult Swim.
It looks to me like he's gonna go fight Sonichu.
Yeah.
Like, that's about Christian level.
If you don't know who Sonichu is, consider yourself lucky.
Yeah, you lived a good life. God, that's big points if you don't know who Sonichu is.
We have a gaggle of trophy wives at the back with their designer bags who are spending their husband's money to stroke their own egos, say, I'm a patron of the arts, as they're going to run out and go to their Pilates class.
Yeah, I've worked a lot of these fundraisers. This is not my favorite clients, we'll put it that way. These are generally hard to please people. So
hard to please and love to complain.
Yeah.
It makes their night if they complain.
Well, because they're asserting authority. Sorry. Now they're getting something done for the arts.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You see two very well-dressed men on the left there, but they're probably security guards.
Yeah, you get to a certain amount, like in art, if there's enough assets on site, you basically have to have security or they won't insure your venue. These guys look like, like some off-duty cops or something. Just like, well, beats working the bars.
There's probably some arts history student somewhere in this building who's $200,000 in debt and making minimum wage to work at the desk.
He doesn't even get to call himself a docent.
No.
It's just...
It's like these people get art history degrees hoping they'll be a curator someday, then they graduate and realize, oh, the current batch of curators is not going to retire for another 30 years, and they're not going to open that many more museums.
Oh. No, not the way society's going. We're not going to say that.
But most importantly, this monstrosity in the foreground.
Yeah.
What is this thing? This was made by a man named Jeff Koons.
Oh, God.
Who is Jeff Koons?
I don't like him already.
Jeff Koons was a man who went to art school, moved to New York, worked at the Museum of Modern Art, and, oh God, we're going to be talking about MoMA, probably not in this episode, but the next episode, but MoMA is going to be the villain in our story.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the Museum of Modern Art's almost single-handedly destroyed aesthetics. Well, but that's for a later day. That's for a later episode. After not being able to pay the bills, working, ripping tickets at the Museum of Modern Art, what did he do? He became a Wall Street commodities trader.
Yeah, and I can be amazed if a well-connected family is a well-connected family. Yes. At the end of the day.
Yep.
I smell it. I don't know this guy. I'm smelling a well-connected kid.
Oh, here's something else that won't surprise you at all. Then he married an Italian porn star for a little bit. So, God forbid he miss any cliches.
Now, I want to warn any aspiring Italian porn stars. If it's old money, you never get near it. It doesn't matter. They don't let the dumb kid anywhere near the money. It's all in the corporation.
Yeah, the family trusts.
And the dads, no one's going to let you get married, or you have to sign papers saying I have no access to any of this money.
Especially if it's a porn star.
Yeah. So it's always interesting for me to see this guy.
Yep.
Let me get that there.
So, from a puff piece about this event, I think it was in the Independent or the LA Times, I can't remember which newspaper it was in, but this is a quote. A dealer with Christie's said contemporary art is an asset one can borrow against, trade, or defer capital gains taxes on. Art's financial appeal stems from the idea that works are undervalued and will increase with heightened demand for scarce objects, a roll-up of private wealth, and the necessity for a new asset class. And did I mention this was 2008?
Oh, that's apropos.
So, what's going on here? We talked about the full context of somebody having dinner parties in the year 1910. What is the full context in the year 2008? A Wall Street cokehead knows a rich guy who needs to do some creative accounting.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine a lot of guys having fun moving numbers around with these freaking things.
So how much do you think he sold this work of art for? I'm using that term very, very loosely.
I'm going to be hurt. Because, how much did this go?
$58 million.
Oh my God. Now, I want to say I worked in bars and restaurants and a lot of places like that in my capacity as event security. And you couldn't throw a rock at some of the venues that I worked at without hitting an artist that is just infinitely more talented. than the person who made and presented this. And that's why I'm a little bit passionate here, is there's just so many very talented artists that are not getting $58 million.
Yeah, he broke the record for most for highest price by an artist who was still alive. This whole racket, and that's all it is. It's a racket. It's, as that newspaper article said, it's just rich people want to defer capital gains taxes, so they buy this stuff hoping they can sell it for a higher price to an even bigger sucker, or if the value goes down, they can write off a loss. And this racket just comes out of the fact that, like I said, nobody can define what the word art is. But clearly, looking at this picture and the previous picture from 1910, whatever happened is a 20th century issue. It's between 1910 and 2008. Whatever went wrong, and something went horribly wrong, it happened between those two bookends. And in fact, I can actually cut that in half, because I'm going to read you a quote from the year 1974.
Okay.
So this is by a man named Octavio Paz. He was a poet from Mexico, and he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He wrote a book called Children of the Mire, Modern Poetry from Romanticism to the Avant-Garde. It was as pretentious as you'd expect it to be, but there was an interesting quote in it, and I'm going to read it. Modern art is beginning to lose its powers of negation. For some years now, its rejections have been ritual repetitions. Rebellion has turned into procedure, and Paz is spelled procedure with capital P. Criticism has turned into rhetoric, transgression into ceremony. Negation is no longer creative. I am not saying that we are living the end of art. We are living at the end of the idea of modern art. Now that quote seems just as fresh now as it must have in the year 1974. Because I look at this picture with the balloon dog that sold for $58 million, and I think everything he said seems as fresh as a daisy when I look at that picture.
Yeah.
So, again, the quote was from 1974, exactly 50 years ago. It's the year 2024 now. So this tells us that art has stalled for at least 50 years.
A period of stagnation.
Yeah. But Paz was not like some young guy when he wrote this. He was in his 60s.
Okay, so he's seen the whole freaking...
Exactly. Whatever happened, as he was born in 1914, so he wouldn't have seen that Ruben Casaloma in 1910. But whatever went wrong happened over the course of his life, so whatever horrible turn that art took, he would have at least seen it firsthand.
We got a living witness, folks.
Let's break down the quote. Modern art is beginning to lose its powers of negation.
What does he mean by negation?
Well, first of all, why is it beginning? He said it's beginning to lose its powers of negation. Why is it just starting? Why is it just starting in the 1970s? And yeah, like power of negation. Does that? At least when I think of that, I think of like going to see a Broadway show. It's not like our grandparents loved show tunes. Now you see something on Broadway, they're like winking at the audience. Hey, we're singing and dancing up here. Isn't this silly?
Oh, okay.
Like,
So it's what do they call it in drama class? The freaking willful suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. Well, it's also just they're consciously breaking the form instead of creating something new.
So you go to the ballet and they're tap dancing, just they're just flailing on the floor.
Oh, they're doing that at symphonies now, which really upsets me.
Oh god.
There was some, let's say, colorful gentleman jiving at like the New York Philharmonic or something. If you really want to question whether society should continue, look up that video on YouTube.
Well, I think the thing for me that was the weirdest was watching the school debates.
Oh, yeah.
America, that way somehow it became like ethnic slam poetry. And there's nothing wrong with ethnic slam poetry.
There's a lot wrong with that slam poetry.
I'm always happy to see people express their differences peacefully. If you're not burning things down, if you're not, God bless you. You bang that drum and you tell me, all about the white man and what he did.
Yeah.
But
the problem is, you have some theater fag like Tupac who decides he wants street cred.
I remember I worked with a lot of very well-meaning urbanized kids. And when I had to explain to them that Tupac went to performing arts high school.
And was a ballet dancer.
And he was a dancer, and he did a movie called Juice, where he played a gangster, and then he just pretended to be a gangster. And then eventually, pretending to be a gangster, he got himself shot.
He's a devoted method actor, I'll give him that.
And they were horrified when I tell them that, because they thought he was this street poet that summed up their struggles. And it was weird because as much as I knew that, I didn't really believe it until I saw it happen to Drake.
Yeah.
It's just you saw that living in Toronto, I got to see that transition. So from theater kid to theater kid pretending to be a gangster to kid who's getting his house shot and clubs shot. Anyway, one of his security guards was killed recently.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they shot up his house.
Cool.
So they shot up one of his houses, I should say, and they killed one of his security. So that was one of my last straws with my last security employer, is they told me I had to go and work a venue that he was affiliated with, and I knew I got to be careful with what I'm saying here, but I knew there was a high likelihood of some very dumb shit happening at that venue based on some silly decisions that were being made at the time. And I said no, and sure enough, there was a shooting at that venue. Anyway.
So, speaking of negations, people getting shot.
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
Hey,
I don't like them negations.
Okay, I wasn't even going there, but okay. So, yeah, it's just going back to this. So, modern art is being inclusive powers of negation. Art has always been on the artist patron model. So, why the hell would a patron pay a whole bunch of money for somebody who's going to negate things?
It's a good question.
Well, I'm not going to answer that right now. In fact, I'm not sure I have an answer to that specifically, but it just seems very, very weird that the quote would start with something like that. The quote continues, "For some years now, its rejections have been ritual repetitions." So if it's repetitive to the point of ritual, again, why are patrons paying for something repetitive? The whole point of having a different piece of art over the fireplace is it's supposed to be a conversation piece. Do people just want to have the same conversations over and over? Well, okay, now that I've met a few rich people, yeah, a lot of them do, but...
It's safe. It's safe, and they feel smart. So,
but, more importantly, he says ritual repetitions. There's a lot of things that are repetitive in this world. If you get, a job digging holes, it's going to be a very repetitive job, but nobody would say it's a ritual.
Yeah.
When I hear the word ritual, it's almost a religious incantation, like a Gregorian chant or something. Everybody wants to have the same conversation over and over about how this freaking balloon dog breaks barriers or whatever.
Can you believe we bought this?
Well, but again, ritual means there's some sort of belief that it's important. So I think they do, at least on some level, somebody believes that they're buying something important, or they're just doing it for the tax write-off. I don't know.
Imagine these freaking millionaires or billionaires with sitting around this dog like the apes around the monolith in 2001.
Rebellion has turned into procedure, criticism into rhetoric, transgression into ceremony. So if modern art has become terrible and derivative, that means at one point it must have been fresh to be transgressive, right? At least that's what I'm reading into this quote.
Yeah, makes sense.
So what were they rebelling against? What was it criticizing? What was it transgressing? And when was it fresh? And again, why is this whole LARP a ceremony? you know, I can see it. You watch people talking about how Banksy's a genius because he is talented when he vandalizes buildings. But I mean, like when you hear the black turtleneck crowd talking about how Banksy's a genius, yeah, that's like a ceremony. That's not. I don't think anybody is truly saying that Banksy is a genius because they came across Banksy's work on their own.
There's a very famous kind of modern art festival in Toronto. It's called Nuit Blanche, and they need a lot of security because it goes all night. So I got bored. I had a job at one point watching and making sure that people didn't go into a construction area when they were wandering around seeing the exhibits. And I was able to convince person after person on my 12-hour shift that this was a modern art installation designed to make you think about the effects that automation was having on the working class, because it was an empty work site. So this, and they bought it,
Yeah.
and they were taking pictures of it, and people wouldn't believe. I'm telling the other security guys, come watch me do this.
Look at this picture, man. The pictures that one of these people had taken could have easily ended up in this presentation if we'd found it on social media.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Wouldn't surprise me if there was like a pile of bricks somewhere that somebody called art. And if there isn't, some modern artist probably just heard that and got his new idea for his next entrance for the Turner Prize next year.
Well, you know homie's going to Google himself and find this podcast. And I just want to say, if I was your dad, homie, I would be deeply ashamed of you. Like every day I would get up and be like, my son is a failure. Did you see this fucking dog? I don't care what it's sold for. That's our family's legacy.
Yeah. Once you're a commodities trader on Wall Street, I think you've lost any sense of shame.
Yeah, finance people are not. I like them because they see their time as valuable, so they're not going to sit around and give like security shit because they just see their time as too valuable for that. So like I appreciate that aspect of them. They're going to eat their steak and leave, and you're going to go home. But like, you know, generally that speaks to a worldview that is like, you know, not doesn't make for the most balanced, pleasant person to be around.
Yeah. So the last two sentences of that quote, though, are the most important sentences. It says, I'm not saying that we are living the end of art. We are living the end of the idea of modern art. What's the idea of modern art? That is the question, to quote Shakespeare. Why was it negative? Why was it repetitive in 1974? Why is it just as derivative 50 years later in 2024? And if he had to clarify, I'm not saying that art is finished, that means he must have had at least some colleagues who are asking, does this mean art is finished? Like, why would they be worried about that? But if nothing has changed in 50 years, if we have, like, gypsies ripping off South African raver music videos, maybe they were right. Maybe art was over. But how can we say they were right or wrong if we haven't come up with a definition of art yet? Like, that's kind of what this deep dive is about. Like, I don't want this to be just another art history lecture that you have on YouTube. I mean, just this is a serious question. Did art end in the 70s when that guy had to guy had to clarify? Oh, I'm not saying art is done. Yeah, maybe art was done. I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. I'm just saying we have to define the word. But whatever happened, we've narrowed it down to 64 years, 1910 to 1974.
We're finding the limits of this equation.
Yep. So between 1910 and 1974, something happened, and it's the obvious guess is that there were a couple of international skirmishes, a couple of, let's say, worldwide international skirmishes that happened.
A little bit of a dust up, a little bit of friction.
Two of them, yeah. But any art history professor will tell you that, oh yeah, the devastation caused by World War I and World War II caused people's philosophy and sense of aesthetics to completely change. I'm calling bullshit on that. I just have a hard time believing that all of society's sense of aesthetic changed to a point that they're going to see this balloon dog as something not even aesthetically pleasing, just desirable.
If our sense of aesthetics had fundamentally changed after the wars, why can I look at art from antiquity and just know it intrinsically as beautiful art?
Yeah.
You know, why can I do that? You know, I can do that in the same way I can look at this and say this is idiotic. So,
exactly. So again, we have to have the confidence to call bullshit on this whole endeavor, and that's part of what this episode and the next couple of them are supposed to be. Like 100 years ago, yeah, you had to have a rich dad who could send you to Oxford or Cambridge to study art history, and you know, you and maybe 1,000 people in the whole world could have an intelligent discussion about this. We live in the age of YouTube.
Yeah, and you don't have to know Latin.
No.
It's all kinds. There's no like the
Yeah.
barriers have never been less.
Yeah. Like, don't ever listen to some idiot in a black turtleneck who says, oh, the little people just don't truly get the aesthetics of what's going on here, or don't truly get the higher meaning. No, not true. I'm calling bullshit on it, and you should be able to call bullshit on it as well. But, you know, just to get a sense of what happened, though, between 1910 and 1974, we're going to look as a representative example at one Piet Mondrian. He was a giant of Dutch art in the early 20th century, and we're going to look at how over a couple of decades one man's art style completely changed with the times. And when you look at this stuff, I just want you to remember everything you're about to see was considered modern and up to date, and what you expected rich people to buy and put in their dining rooms. So let's take a look at Piet Mondrian. This is called Mill in the Evening, 1905.
This is beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's a little bit impressionistic. Like, it's maybe not like what you would actually see if you were in the Netherlands looking at this windmill. The use of color is maybe more of an artistic decision than realistic, but I mean, this is something that would really tie the room together, as the dude would say.
Yeah, definitely. To me, he's captured that perfect moment between day and night. That perfect twilight second where it's not, you know, anyway.
The important thing is we've established that in 1905, the man is clearly talented, clearly a talented artist.
He's got the chops.
Yeah, he is not the girl who put the doily on the car or anything like that.
Nope.
That's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a man who has the hand and the eye and the je ne sais quoi. He can make good art.
Make something beautiful. Ugh.
1909. This is called View from the Dunes with Beach and Piers.
What the hell is this? Looks like something some kid made out of sand.
Yeah. This is called Expressionism, or Post-Impressionism, however you want to, whatever movement you want to call it.
Oh, it's a movement.
It's a movement, yes. You can tell that it is at least trying to make it look like a seascape. Expressionism means you're more concerned with getting the idea across than making it necessarily look like anything in the real world. But, you know, you're pushing it, buddy.
Yeah, this is very, I don't know. This doesn't jump out to me as beautiful. I don't see this. I don't see the beauty, like the way, and I don't see the skill that I did in his other piece of art. Like, this is just, you know, it's. I feel like he's not trying anymore.
Well,
like, he just let himself go.
But again, he's making a conscious decision that he's only going to use a palette of 2 or 3 colors here, whether you think it's aesthetically pleasing or not. You know, he's really made a decision. He's not like the guy from the start of the episode who just looked like he was finger painting or whatever. He's clearly made a decision to use a limited palette and, you know, take it or leave it.
This looks like something out of Warhammer 40K.
I've never done DMT, but from listening to Rogan, this is how I imagine a DMT trip.
Yeah, there's no clockwork elves, but like, yeah, pretty much.
If you know a bit about art history, this is called Fauvism. It was all the rage in the art world for a few years. You use bright, vibrant colors to get the point across. Again, it doesn't need to be realistic at all. The whole point is your choice of an ostentatious color palette is the point of art. I mean, I can certainly see this catching your eye as you walk into a room, but also it's supposed to be a windmill, but I think it's much, if I want to look at a windmill, I'd rather look at the previous one.
Yeah, this looks more Killer Robot and less windmill to me.
Well, this looks like one of these modern turbines that kills all the birds.
Yeah, exactly. Because we can't just use nuclear power.
But again, this is 1908. This is...
So they could have used nuclear power.
Well, okay.
Anyways.
1910. Is it called Evening the Red Tree?
Alright. It's a very straightforward title. It's Nighttime Red Tree. Yeah, okay.
It's a tree.
Yeah, it delivers what it says.
So, well, this is called Expressionism, which... It's more, the previous one was called Expressionism as well, but this is more explicitly expressionistic. This is where you just don't care if it actually looks like any sort of a tree, but you're using geometry to get the point across that it's supposed to be a tree.
It looks like the evil tree from Poltergeist.
Well, yeah, but it's something stylized. Yeah, it's
like something out of a nightmare.
Yeah, or look like Tim Burton. It even looks like Tim Burton's hair.
Yeah, it's kind of skinny, long, black.
Or Edward Scissorhands.
What a messed up movie! Oh my god.
What do you think of this? Yeah, that
makes me sad. It makes me sad. It looks like somebody's drawn their persona. And it's in black, the guy's colorblind, so it's come across. There's like he's trying to draw his cat dragon persona, and it's just this is what comes out, and you're like, good job, and you really like Sonic the Hedgehog, and
so this is a word I'm sure you've heard when you hear pretentious people talking about art. This is cubism. What cubism is you imagine if you took something in 3 dimensions, chopped it up, and then put all of the pieces on a 2-dimensional plane, like it was a collage or something.
Okay.
Like, it's called the gray tree. The previous one was the red tree. This is the gray tree. But you see how there's just no depth whatsoever here?
Yeah. I didn't even see a tree till you said that. I saw a weird face.
Yeah. We associate Cubism with Picasso, who, lots have been said about that guy. But this is Mondrian's foray into Cubism in the year 1912.
Jeez. Apparently Picasso smelled really bad.
Yeah. He also liked him young.
Oh, did he? Okay. Yeah, artists, creatives, in my experience, they're not typically good people. Like it's not. That's been my experience with creatives. What can you do? Like it's just.
Yeah.
You be careful. Be careful around artists. Basically, is what I'm saying. In every artist, there's something savoring of the crook.
Yeah.
Robertson Davies. Robertson Davies said.
One day you're Justin Bieber making YouTube videos in Stratford, Ontario. The next day you're being passed around Diddy's party like a peace pipe.
And the next day you're freaking making sandwiches in jail for everybody. You're like, hey, you sandwich guy, making sandwiches again.
All right.
This looks like a video game level from an 8-bit system.
This is called Composition Number 10, Pier and Ocean. It was done in 1915. Does this look like a pier and or an ocean to you?
No.
I can maybe give him like the last one that was about a pier and ocean, the one with the blue and orange stripes. This one, this is something like I would draw in my notebook when I was bored in class in school.
This is what a bunch of crosses look like if you're dyslexic. That's what I'm going for. This is like the poppies row on row, Remembrance Day. This is what, if you're dyslexic, this is what that looks like.
Now, again, this is from 1915. People say that during the war, because the war was such a catastrophe, everybody just said, oh, what's the point of making anything beautiful anymore? So let's do shit like this. But you can clearly tell this is part of a 10-year trend from the windmill to this.
Yeah, this is. It's. I feel like I think it's like the guy can get away with less and less effort. I just feel like he's like testing. He's like, what will they let me get away with? And
yeah, where's the real line?
The real line, we're still being deceptive as well. Okay,
we haven't gone to the real line yet.
Oh god, that's not. I've used fishing lures that are more beautiful than this.
So, the overall art movement was called neoplasticism, which was, we live in this industrial age, and if everything in the world is going to become mechanical, why should art look like anything realistic? Why should it have any naturalistic form anymore? Let's just make something aesthetically pleasing purely using shapes and colors.
It's like the kind of thing that, like, if you had a computer that was 3 years old.
Yeah.
That's like the case. Like, you look at what AI can produce nowadays, and then you look at this, oh god.
Well, apparently this was based on the golden ratio. If you're a mathematician, I don't see that many rectangles here that have the golden ratio either. So
homie did not understand the golden ratio.
Again, you have to have the confidence to call bullshit on it. It's called bullshit on some of it. Now, composition with grid 9 in 1919.
Okay, we're playing Tetris apparently. Okay. Yeah. That's what I see.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but I could do something like this.
Yep.
I'm not saying I'm as talented as this guy. He did that windmill. That windmill was gorgeous. Same guy. I feel like his talent is wasted on something like this.
There was a man named Ashley McIsaac who was very talented. And eventually, as some of his personal demons got the better of him, he was not as talented.
No.
Perhaps that's this guy's story too. Giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, this is starting to look like the art that he became world famous for, and I'm sure you've seen this one.
Oh yeah, that one. I've seen that one freaking kicking around the internet. I think I've seen prints on walls.
Yeah. Well, so this is like, I don't want to say the culmination because this seems like a valley, not a mountain.
It's like an 8-bit video game character.
But yeah, this is.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is just what he was known for doing. It was called Die Style, just using 5 colors: white, black, red, yellow, and blue. All of the lines are parallel and perpendicular to the grid. And everything he did from here on just was essentially a variation on this. And again, rich people would buy it. They would say, I want to have a Mondrian and add it to my collection. And this is what they were buying.
Feels like we've reached the end of art.
Well, okay, I mean that's kind of the question we're taking a dive into here. This is composition 2 in 1929. Tell me this is any different than the previous one. This is 8 years after the previous one. He doesn't seem to have moved that far.
It looks like a video game map in a very old school 1990s system, like an early 90s system.
Now, apparently art historians can tell you which year this guy's paintings come from based on the thickness of the lines and how far apart the lines are. That just seems like autism that could be better used.
If you take sommeliers and you dye a bottle of white wine red and ask them for notes,
yeah,
they'll give you red wine notes.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's just, what can you do? That's just, that's how I feel about it. This is like, yeah, this is this note.
Good. But like I said, we're looking at this man's evolution over 3.5 decades, or actually closer to 4 decades. So this is where it culminates, is this picture called New York City. Tell me what you think a picture called New York City would look like.
Different now.
Well,
But
I can tell you that the picture you're about to see definitely does not contain the World Trade Center, or at least the old World Trade Center.
oh, that's too bad. I love those buildings. Oh God.
This is New York City, 1945.
I feel like this is like it's like award-winning
Yeah.
art, but like Special Olympics award-winning. Like I feel like if I found out that like a special person made this, I'd be like, way to go, buddy.
If this is a city in 1945, I would have gone with Hiroshima.
Yeah. There's just not much left there. Some freaking...
Now, a couple of years ago, in 2022, somebody realized, wait a second, this painting has been hanging upside down for the last 50 years.
Oh God.
Now, there's the first thing I'm going to say, that if nobody can tell if your painting is right side up or upside down, maybe it doesn't qualify as art the way that the windmill did.
No, I want to know if this was some jerk-off's freaking master thesis on this painting should be turned upside down.
So if you saw this, and I told you this is hanging upside down, why would you think it's upside down?
I would think that you were messing with me.
Yeah.
I would just like this is, this doesn't seem like something that would make any more sense if inverted.
Yeah.
Like,
Or even turned 90 degrees.
nope, there's no.
So you see how there's 5 stripes at the bottom and only 2 stripes at the top?
Yep.
Apparently that's supposed to be the sky at the bottom.
All right.
So we're going to go back to the question we keep coming back to, is what the hell is art? So the word art, it goes back to ancient Greece, it goes back to ancient Rome, it goes back to antiquity, and the word art referred to a couple of different things.
You know what else ancient Greece and Rome had?
Sami?
I was anyway. Roll.
Am I wrong?
I'm just saying it's funny that we think anyway. It's funny that we have like a society where at least the elites are gay, and this is where we our concept of art comes from. It's anyway, right back. Interesting.
Oh, it doesn't come from the fact that the elites were gay. It comes from the fact that the proles were slaves.
Oh, okay.
So,
There we go.
it was so. Galen, who was a physician in Rome in the 2nd century AD, he said that arts come in 2 forms. There's the liberal arts and the sordid arts. The liberal arts are things of intellectual origin, things like philosophy, things like medicine, things like history, theater. Well, maybe not theater, but like the act of writing plays.
Right.
The act of performing theater is a little more sordid then and now.
Anything that goes back to traveling shows is going to be an interesting story.
So yeah, there's the liberal arts, the arts of intellectual origin, and sordid arts. Those are arts of the hands, of a manual origin. And of course, like I said, there's always been a very much a connotation of slavery when you think of the sordid arts. Like, if you think of a stonemason or something, you'd have said it was the art of masonry, but you wouldn't have expected one of Caesar's closest advisors to be cutting stone, would you?
No, that would be not something I could picture and somebody doing in their off hours just for fun.
Yeah. Not only just for fun, it's slave work. It's for the help. If you know the 7 classical liberal arts, this is something that goes back to Athens. First of all, there's what they call the trivium. This is what the Athenians believed you needed to use to educate a free man. There was grammar, which is the art of classifying things. Logic or dialectics, which was the relationship between the things he classified. And then there's rhetoric, which is kind of the gold standard of the liberal arts, or the gold standard of the arts in Athens.
Can you imagine if kids still had to learn this stuff? Like if every kid had to take a course on rhetoric?
Yeah.
I would be...
We've had to dumb down the standards to make sure people don't feel bad.
Yep.
Actually, I used to work with a guy from India, and he said, in most of the world, there's a reason that people who get through high school are actually quite a lot smarter than people who get through high school in the West. I said, that seems a little weird to me. He says, well, yeah, usually some point when you're 12 or 13, the teacher sends you home with a letter, and it says to your parents, yeah, your kid's just too stupid to educate. This kid belongs tilling the fields. This kid is going to be a net drag on the taxpayers, so why are we going to waste any more money on him now?
Can you imagine if they could get away with that here? So you imagine if Doug Ford could say, wait, we can send 10% of the kids home with a letter.
Well, just look at all these inner city schools in the States that have 3% literacy.
So I took a university level course on education because I wanted to see what was going on there. The quality of the research that education policy is based on is shameful.
Yep.
That was my one takeaway. My other takeaway is if you have all of the kids together, or all the aptitudes, you've got a top 10%, you got a bottom 10%, you got everybody in the middle. If you mix everybody together, it's a little bit better for the middle kids. It's a little bit better for the bottom kids. It completely fucks over your top 10% because they've got to go slower and not get challenged and not learn at the level they want to learn at or they can be taught at. And they get completely fucked.
And in other parts of the world, those kids are fine because their peers got sent home with a letter.
Yep.
So the grammar, logic, and rhetoric, those were the three arts that come from ancient Athens. The other four actually go back to Pythagoras. The arts are arithmetic, which is the study of numbers, geometry, which is the study of numbers in space, music, which is the study of numbers in time, and astronomy, which is the study of numbers in both space and time. And so the liberal arts, like I said, they cover things like philosophy, medicine, history, literature, all that good stuff. And the sordid arts or the vulgar arts, these are associated with the slaves, or at least the underclass. This falls into two categories. The first is what you might call craftsmanship, like the art of cabinet making. And don't be wrong, I mean, I've met some very, very talented woodworkers and carpenters in my life, but they don't seem to have the social status that somebody who could do a good painting in the Renaissance was able to attain.
Yeah, it's messed up.
So go ahead.
You got a guy who's top 1% of carpentry, and you'll never see his work in a museum.
Oh, well, so this is one of the things we're looking into. Why? First of all, this concept of art didn't appear until fairly recently, and why was painting and sculpture, why were these two activities in particular the ones that became synonymous with the word art, when this word, the arts, was always around, but it just referred to any old trade?
It's interesting. I wonder why.
So the second activity that the word arts that the sordid arts referred to was activities which money changes hands for. And this would include things like the merchants.
Okay.
This is the art of the deal. That phrase, like I said, you take a time machine back to the Renaissance and you ask who are all the artists, nobody would know what you were talking about. Or the artists, you mean the glass blower?
What the hell are you talking about?
But if you went back to ancient Rome and you said, in the future, the president is the guy who wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, what do you mean, a sordid artist became your president? Yes. How did he become the president? He hosted a reality TV show, which you don't want to know what that is.
Oh, God. The Americans were very wise. They built a wall between church and state. I would argue they also need a wall between state and entertainment. Yeah. I think they do a lot better. That's my humble outsider opinion. If you ever made your living as an entertainer, you are barred from public office.
Or even barred from endorsing people for public office. I don't want them anywhere near any side of the political process.
Well, it just needs to be understood that the celebrities are clowns. And we don't need to worry about these are people who, if at best, by and large, have a high school education. And, and I understand people have parasocial relationships with them, but it's it should be understood that this is not we need them. It's great. They should be rewarded, but this is not a group of people who should be making decisions on our behalf. Like,
So, you know, this stuff's all good with the liberal arts and the sordid arts, but at no point is it clear why the word artist would ever refer to A, somebody who makes paintings and sculptures, B, some coked out Wall Street guy who makes a big stainless steel balloon animal, and C, why it would even refer to Michelangelo.
yeah.
Like, that doesn't seem clear anywhere here. And like I said, I mean, contemporary writings about Michelangelo still refer to him as a craftsman.
Oh, okay.
Like, even when people wrote about him in his own day, you know, they said he was the greatest artist in Florence. He was the guy who painted the Sistine Chapel, but he was a painter, or he was a sculptor, or he was a craftsman.
Okay. So he's rising out of these lower ranks. You see these.
Yeah, well, but I'm just saying, like, there was no concept of the artist as being, well, I mean, what even is the artist now? We still haven't established what that is. So this is the first thing we're going to unpack, and I know we're running a little bit late on this episode, but trust me, stick with me on this one. We need to get to the etymology of this word artist, because if this word artist were to just go away, then, you know, the idiot who made the necklace that looked like a big sperm, he'd be out of work. Like, if we started calling talented people painters and sculptors again and just got rid of this word artist, what would these conceptual artists do?
I like that we could get rid of the concept of art and we still wouldn't kill real art.
Yep.
It's still there. It's a real thing. It's a word that we use to describe something real. We're having trouble defining it, but it's definitely there.
Yep. We have to go back to a period in time that I keep bringing up, and that's the Renaissance. You know, we've been beating the drum hard about the Reformation and the effect of the printing press on the Protestant world, but we can't forget the other half of that equation, which is the Renaissance. The printing press had a pretty profound impact on the people who didn't leave the Catholic Church as well. The Catholics, believe it or not, were not just a bunch of illiterate peasants from then on.
What?
Yeah, well, back when history degrees actually meant something, which is almost as long ago as the Renaissance at this point, or at least it feels that way.
Our glorious past.
Yeah, you'd be forced to take something called a Ren Ref class, like the Renaissance and the Reformation, and how kind of both of these tracks led to the modern world. So we're going to look at the Renaissance and how out of the Renaissance you didn't just get, you know, the masters like Michelangelo and Raphael, but the concept which, even though it would never be called art until a couple of centuries later, the concept was still there. People just didn't have a word for it. So the Renaissance, it was a period lasting centuries, and again, it wasn't like San Francisco in the 60s where a bunch of rich kids spent a few years in the same city, did a few drugs, wrote a few songs, cut their hair, got a job, and moved away. Like, the Renaissance was 200 years. And one of the things you realize when you're looking at history is that history books don't get written until long after the cathedrals are built. You know, there's usually a certain animating spirit, often as a result of a charismatic leader or two. And that spirit is what leads to, you know, the cathedrals and the statues being built and the military conquests and the technological discoveries. You know, it's not usually a result of some sort of conscious plan. It's a society that just has a certain energy in it, and everybody's on the same page. And the fact that it's not written down, the fact that it's unwritten, almost makes it stronger.
Generations just cresting, you know.
Yeah,
Movements in the zeitgeist. Like, we're social creatures, and you know, we can you know, affect each other very deeply.
Yeah. Well, it's only like after you've had these generations that do these great things, it's only once the society has been established that the procedures and the chronicles start getting written down, and the schools start teaching the next generation how things are done. And when you start doing things by a formula, you can still do great things, but it just doesn't have the same, for lack of a better word, animating spirit. It just doesn't have the same, almost, religious fervor behind things that would allow the Masons to build a cathedral that takes 150 years to finish.
Something like Stonehenge. Think about the work that took, all the people that had to work together, the pyramid.
Again, the history books are written at the end of the fruitful period. You don't usually get the history books written as things are happening. In fact, the fact that we have a lot of history books, and let's be real here, history podcasts right now, tells us that we are at the end of a learned age. And I'm not saying, we're going to enter into another Stone Age or anything like that. I'm just saying that we're on the precipice of something big happening, because the past dispensation is not coming back. If you traveled to the 1470s and went to Rome, nobody would say, like, this is the Renaissance. Like, that word just didn't exist until after the fact. You'd have your fishmongers at the market waiting for Jesus to return, and they would say, there's some new churches that have pretty paintings in it and nice stained glass windows, but like, they were just going about their day. Like, it's not like there was some sort of conscious central plan to make Italy in the 1400s the center of art. In fact, one thing that often gets forgotten is that there was probably just as much, if not more, of an artistic renaissance in the Netherlands at the same time as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're called the Flemish Primitives, but they...
I would go see that prog rock band.
Flemish Primitives? Yeah, fuck, I would too. Even though the people at the time didn't really realize there was something historic going on, it was the time of the flowering of not just painting, but literature, Dante, politics, Machiavelli, science, Galileo, though Galileo was kind of toward the end of the period, exploration, people like Henry the Navigator, and it was all organic. If you asked people what was going on, at best they would say, oh, there was the Black Plague 100 years ago, and it devastated the cities, so you had a whole bunch of the serfs were able to move off the farms into the cities to replace all the vacancies that had just opened up. And, it allowed a bunch more churches to be built. But, again, the term Renaissance, it doesn't actually appear until the end of this period. Arguably, after the Renaissance was in the period known as the Counter-Reformation, when after Martin Luther had, let's just say, started another scuffle or two. At first, the Catholics said, we're going to use force to put all these heretics down. And then they realized that, oh no, this isn't going to work. We actually have to make a better argument. So this period known as the Counter-Reformation is when a lot of the Catholic literature gets written, and they establish, okay, what does being a Catholic mean when it's no longer taken for granted, when we have to prove we're better than the Protestants? That is when a lot of this literature gets written. That's when the word Renaissance first appears. It wasn't just the printing press that allowed the Protestants to break free of the church. The printing press allowed the Catholic Church to put forth their case. Just to go over the timeline very, very briefly, Martin Luther was 1517. The Reformation spreads like wildfire in the 1520s. We talked about that in another episode. I'm not going to rehash it. But immediately before that, between about 1500 and 1520, that was what we call the High Renaissance. That was when you have Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. That's when you have Leonardo, Raphael. That was the absolute height of the arts. That was right before Martin Luther had to go divert the church's attention. The Council of Trent, that was essentially what starts the Counter-Reformation. That happens for almost 20 years, from about 1545 to 1563. This is the Counter-Reformation I was talking about. If we want to go back in the opposite direction, 1457, this is the fall of Constantinople. So
That's a great story.
Oh yeah, yeah. But the most important thing, at least relevant to what we're doing here, is you had a bunch of Greek scholars who are no longer welcome in Greece and what's now Turkey. So you have a whole bunch of scholars that had to flee west to Rome. So you had a big influx of these people as well. And
it's okay. I'm sure Greece and Turkey worked it out peacefully. They're buddies now, I'm sure.
After the Berlin Wall fell, it became like something that Cyprus puts on their like tourism Department of Tourism website. We're the last divided capital in Europe.
Jesus Christ.
At least a couple of years ago it did. If you went on Nicosia's website, it was, yeah, we're the last divided capital in Europe.
Oh, God. Come and see what the frickin' Cold War was like without going to North Korea.
One group calls their sandwiches gyros. One of them calls them shawarmas. I don't know what else the difference is. I know I just offended half.
You don't tell them that.
No, you don't. But I'm just saying, I live in Toronto where there's a bunch of gyro shops and a bunch of shawarma shops. I don't know what the difference is. Sorry, guys.
At a certain point, these ethnicities stop mattering, because like if you go to these places, it's not like usually a hard stop. It's kind of like a fade.
Yeah.
When we asked my Dido if he was Ukrainian or Polish, he said, "Well, I speak both." And we said, "Well, are you Polish or Ukrainian?" And he'd be like, "Well, it depended where they put the border."
Yeah.
And he could go and party with the Polish old dudes, and he could party with the Ukrainian. Like it didn't matter. It was, what was he? They're all the same at a certain level. Like,
they're all the same, but they have disagreements over who should have that little tiny patch of land the size of a phone booth.
I told you, it's our outhouse.
Yeah. So the early 1400s, that was when at least in hindsight, that's when you started seeing the work, the artwork that we now associate with the Renaissance. But I mean, even in the 1300s, there were a few isolated examples of, this flowering of culture. The most obvious example is Dante. He was, I think, 1299. You also had Petrarch, who found the writings of Cicero. And the interesting thing about Petrarch, just like the word Renaissance doesn't appear until the end of the period that we call the Renaissance, Petrarch is the guy who comes up with the concept of the Dark Ages. Again, the chronicles start to happen, the people start to write their theories of what happened. The history podcasts start to appear at the end of the period, not in the middle of a time of culture. So,
all right, we're going to talk about what we did.
Yeah, sorry guys, you're not living in an age of great men. You're living in an age when you have a couple of stoners talking into a microphone.
Sorry, guys. It is what it is.
It is what it is, and you do not have to pay $150,000 for a liberal arts degree, which doesn't make you any more employable, and you're going to get a better education this way.
You'll have more fun, hopefully.
Yeah. There are also a couple of painters named Pisano and Giotto, who I'll mention in a little bit. But they, arguably, they are the two who foreshadow the Renaissance, but they're at least a little bit earlier in time. Again, just like Petrarch is the guy at the end of the Dark Ages who comes up with the concept of the Dark Age, was there a guy at the end of the Renaissance who comes up with the concept of the Renaissance? Well, the answer is yes. There was a man named Giorgio Vasari, and as far as anybody knows, the first instance of the term Rinascita, which is Italian for Renaissance, as far as anybody knows, he came up with the first instance of it. It was in a book titled Le vite dei più eccellenti pittori, scultori e architettori. I don't know how terrible my Italian is. That was more of a Super Mario accent, I'm sure. But it translates as the lives of the most excellent painters, sculptors, and architects. Now, future translations sometimes call this book The Lives of the Artists, but this is an anachronism because they're never referred to that way. They're never referred to as the artists. They were just referred to as what I said in the title, painters, sculptors, and architects, though certainly some people were more than one of them. I mean, the archetype of the Renaissance man was a man who was good at many things, not just one or two of these arts.
Including sports.
Yeah, like we think of like Florence in the Renaissance as a scholarly place with men in tights. No, like there were like brutal sports that they would find people from the prisoners. They would find people from the prisons to start playing in the streets.
And remember, right. Anybody could be like, hey, I demand satisfaction. We're going to have a fucking duel. And then homie gets to legally stab you with a long pointy sword. So you better be good at that shit.
And Italians know how to hold a grudge.
That they do.
Did I piss you off? No, your grandfather pissed off my grandfather.
Going in the river.
The book's written in the 1550s, and again, even though the word art doesn't exist in the 1550s, the concept that we now recognize as art really comes out of this book. It really is a book of what we would now call art history. It's a book of all the painters and sculptors who lived in the last 200 years, and he's trying to weave the whole thing into a narrative of how we ended up with Michelangelo and Raphael and Leonardo. But the book is just a piece of propaganda. I can't exactly take it as an accurate description of what happened, because I mean, not least because the guy was a fanboy of Michelangelo. Michelangelo lived till he was almost 90. I might not expect that for somebody who lived in this period. But, you know, if Vasari wanted to be in Michelangelo's good graces, so a lot of his stories were about how great Michelangelo was. A lot of the stories were also gossip about some of his rivals, trying to make them look bad. And one of them in particular was a guy who gave the name Il Sodoma to. So
some catty shit.
Yeah, as best as we know, there's no evidence that he was a sodomite, but
there's no fossils.
He's gone down in history as Il Sodoma because that's how he's described in this book.
Sorry, homie. Them's the breaks.
Who is Vasari, though? I mean, he's a working artist. He is not the guy who makes the masterpieces. He's the guy who, when one of the Medicis or a pope says, we need to get this church built and painted stat by the end of the year, just paint the frescoes and be done with it. He's the guy you would call in. He would get it done at one point, at least according to legend. Who knows how much of it's true, how much of it's propaganda. He claimed, I completed this in 100 days. And Michelangelo says, yeah, I can tell.
So, I like this guy's like utility painter.
Yeah, that's actually a very good way of putting it. Like you're saying, if Vasari hadn't written this book, he would just be another guy who, you know, you'd walk into some church in Florence, you'd see his signature on a couple of these paintings and say, okay, this is some mediocre artist from 500 years ago. Let's go see David.
You don't paint as good as a Michelangelo.
But he painted better than his Sodoma.
but he bring it in under budget.
He also goes out of his way to say there were three geniuses of the era: Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael. But Michelangelo was so much better than the other two.
Yep.
Another thing that you realize from the propaganda is he wants to make his patrons look good. Which, why wouldn't you? They're the people who make sure you have food on the table.
Your modern day sponsors.
In the Renaissance, there were three major centers of art. There were Florence, which is where Vasari started. There's Rome, which is where Vasari had to flee after a couple of his Medici patrons had been murdered.
Because Italy.
It is Italy. And there was Venice. And he went out of his way to not talk about Venetians. Like they said, Venetians were, well, people who made stuff like this. They used bright colors, but there's nothing sophisticated about that. That's like a cheap trick for the rules, for the rooms, for the proles. Again,
pornography. That's all they're giving you.
Because again, even in the 1500s, this fucking black turtleneck kind of shit was going on.
People still wanted to look at boobs.
You know, this painting in particular is by a man named Titian. Titian was the one guy who was from Venice who was so famous that Vasari could not talk about him. We talked about Charles V in our Reformation episode. He was the Holy Roman Emperor who had everything fall in his lap, like his one grandfather was the King of Austria, that his mother was the Queen of the Netherlands, and his dad was the King of Spain, or maybe I have that reversed, I can't remember. And Spain had just discovered the New World, so this guy at the age of 18, everything fell in his lap. Well, Titian was the guy who was his personal portrait painter, and he was privy to a lot of the palace intrigue and to a lot of political stuff that you would never have heard about if you weren't another noble or a prince yourself. Being a painter was one of the few ways to get into the room when all of these conversations were happening.
For hours.
Yeah. The only other people from from this point in history who we know might have been privy to some of the hot gossip was like doctors, physicians. They were the only other commoners who might have had access to the real political secrets.
Who had gonorrhea?
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but you did. So again, Titian is the guy who makes this painting, and so Vasari has to have an entry on Titian. And he says, well, I just happened to be with Michelangelo when we visited his studio, because of course, and we were very cordial to him. He was cordial to us, but when we walked out of the studio, I was like, hey, Mike, what did you think of him? And Michelangelo said, well, he's a very talented painter, but he doesn't know how to draw. Because again, just this cat bullshit.
Artists do have a hard time working together. There's a lot of just cutthroat shit.
Get involved in community theater. Get the smallest, most low-stakes community theater, and there will still be a whole bunch of backstabbing behind the scenes.
This Game of Thrones shit going on to try to see who's gonna freaking direct the fucking Little Mermaid.
I've been in exactly one musical in my life, and there was one autistic kid in the cast. And the one gay guy had some disagreements with the director, so he tried to convince the autistic kid to do things a different way.
You just can't freaking work together. You can't check your ego. No. You gotta try and get the autistic kid to do it your way.
Vasari's book, The Lives, I'm just going to call it The Lives of Artists. Again, that's something that's put on the book retroactively. It's totally anachronistic, but I don't want to keep saying the lives of the most excellent painters and sculptors and architects. I'm just going to call it The Lives of Artists. Like I said, it's the first look at the concept that we now call art and the first retrospective of the Renaissance. And like every other art manifesto, on some level, it's a crazy guy saying, you know, art has finally reached its enlightened stage. Everything up to this point is garbage. This is the best thing ever. And things are only going to get better from here on. And when you're saying everything up to this point is garbage, you have to kind of scapegoat everything that came up to that point. And everything that came up to that point is what you see on the screen here, Gothic architecture. Now, I think this stuff is beautiful. I certainly think this stuff is better than most modern architecture, this brutalist stuff we saw in the 1970s was, I think, the true low point in architecture. But if you're going to be writing your artist's manifesto and say that we're now reaching an enlightened stage, you have to talk about what came before, like it was barbaric, and he spends a lot of time talking about Gothic architecture is just something that the modern enlightened age has moved on past. And this is what he essentially uses as the transitional fossil, the moment that the modern enlightened Italians decided to move past the old Gothic barbaric age. On the left, you see an ancient Roman sarcophagus. The ruins of ancient Rome never went away. They're still visible to this day in Italy, stuff like the aqueducts, which people don't necessarily understand anymore, but the ruins are still there, and some of the old art is still there. Well, on the right, you see the pulpit of a Catholic church, and that pulpit was designed by a man named Pizarro. And you'll notice that the style looks very similar to the old ancient Roman sarcophagus. But the iconography in that pulpit, it's Christian iconography. That's Mary and Jesus and the wise men.
And everybody's got clothes on.
Well, that too.
Almost.
Well, this is where Vasari said the Italians realized that the Romans had bequeathed a great tradition to us, and what the hell were we doing building this old Gothic stuff, which was just geometric and lifeless? This is our own cultural inheritance. We have to start putting this back in the stuff that we're using to glorify God in our own buildings.
And the idea of a reconstructed Roman Empire will never have any negative effects in Italy ever. The idea that they're the inheritors to Rome.
We'll do a bit on some adventures in Ethiopia in the early 20th century. Spoiler alert, it required planes to finally beat some people with spears.
The Italians are not good at war. Spoilers.
We see here that art is not, I'll get what we now call art. It's not just something abstract. It's not something that, some genius came up with in one day. This ancient sarcophagus was very much part of the Italian culture. And when he decided to start incorporating the old classical ideas into the architecture and the sculpture of the day, it seemed very natural. It wasn't just one crazy guy doing a drug trip and coming up with a crazy idea. It was something that was, it's something that seemed organic, for lack of a better word. Did this guy actually pioneer things? Well, who knows? But in the book, Vasari talks about him like he's Moses, kind of bringing the Italians from the barbaric world of Gothic architecture into the promised land of what became the Renaissance. In fact, well, here's another closer look at it, a different angle. You can really see the detail on that, but you can clearly see the Roman influence as well.
Oh, yeah.
Pisano was one of the people he talked about. The other person he talked about is a man named Giotto. Now, these are a bunch of old Byzantine icons of Jesus. You see, they look very flat. They don't necessarily look realistic. I mean, they still look beautiful in their own way. Don't get me wrong. They're not. Yeah.
Is what the kids would say.
But, there's also not necessarily any, There's nothing about them that just jumps out at me like they're a real person.
Yeah.
They're more than stickmen, don't get me wrong, and there's certainly more to it than whatever that gypsy lady drew on her fabrics.
It's a drawing.
But something still feels almost foreign about this.
Yeah. Looks like something from Turkey.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So Giotto was a guy who Vasari said the man who taught paintings to cry. And this is
What a legacy.
Yeah. Now there still is something uncanny about this. I wouldn't say this painting looks realistic, but looking at those faces, those faces seem to have a little more emotion in them than the old Byzantine style icons of Jesus. And more importantly, though, the last paintings, they seemed a little bit foreign. I don't think these paintings seem foreign.
No, now it looks more like, Western European.
Yeah, exactly. They look more familiar. And it really started with this one guy who said, I'm going to make the faces a lot more, and some of the features on these icons a little bit more realistic. And again, this is not, this is a far cry from what art became in the upcoming centuries. But when we think about the concept that we now call art, it really starts here. It really starts with this guy, because before this, even art that was made just a couple decades before this, it feels foreign to us, or at least it doesn't look ugly, but just something feels different about it. This, at least to me, this painting feels like it's part of a tradition that I belong to.
Like European.
Yeah. I mean, also maybe it looks familiar because I could also see like a Monty Python painting looking like this as well.
Yep.
But that's part of our tradition as well.
Exactly.
Monty Python didn't look like the Byzantine tradition. Monty Python looked like this tradition. This painting's called the Organizzati Madonna, which I don't know how that's pronounced, but if you want to Google it, that's what it's called.
If you try to be Monty Python in the Byzantine parts, you get your head cut off.
Here you just get burned at the stake.
Exactly.
So whatever art is, it starts here. We still haven't defined it yet, but whatever we call art is something which is a very specific cultural context. And farther back than this specific point in time, it's painting, it's sculpture, but it's just something different. Also, note something else, that nothing about this art is supposed to be conceptual. Vasari has a story about Giotto where the townsfolk asked him, hey, Giotto, can you show us your genius? So what he does is he paints a perfect circle. Why is this an important story? It's because he talks about being a good painter is something that requires technical skill.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't just put a doily on a car.
It's like being a good fighter.
Yeah.
You gotta have the basics.
Yeah. Like, was this story true or not? Who cares? It really doesn't matter. It just means that painting is something that was taken very, very seriously. It's not something frivolous that we now see at the Turner Prize. But so Giotto and Pisano, they were pre-Renaissance. They were kind of talked about as, like I said, as Moses, as the people in the first part of the Old Testament, the before times. He then writes about some 15th century artists who he talks about as really ushering in what we now call as the Renaissance.
Okay.
Oh, right. I should also say this is another one of Giotto's paintings.
Nice. I like that.
Again, and again, it just seems familiar.
Yeah.
This would have only been a couple of years after the Byzantine style icons, but this,
It's like Lord of the Rings.
yeah. So one of the people Vasari writes about in the early 15th century is Brunelleschi. He's known most for making that dome, which is still to this day prominent in Florence's skyline. And even today it's still considered a marvel of engineering that he was able to do it.
It's a big dome.
It is. But he didn't just make that dome. He was also, just like Pisano, he was an architect who built Christian churches and Christian chapels in the old Roman style. So he was known as one of the people who brought in what Vasari now calls the Renaissance. The next guy, Donatello. So yes, those of you who grew up in the 90s, when you heard me say Raphael, Leonardo, and Michelangelo, you were thinking I was missing somebody. I wasn't. Donatello was just 100 years earlier.
I bit my lip to not say about Ninja Turtles because I didn't want to look old.
But we have given away our age enough times.
It is what it is.
We talk about remembering like universities when they taught things. So this level of realism in sculptures, this is just something that would have been absolutely shocking to see at the time. Now, I mean, still, again, you still certainly see the beauty in all this stuff. The one on the right especially is supposed to be Mary Magdalene. And I mean, Mary Magdalene was the prostitute. She was a whore, so he didn't make her look beautiful. But, this is a wood sculpture with gold plating, and it's a level of realism that would have just been absolutely, earth-shattering in the 1400s.
I could almost see that walking around the streets of Toronto.
Yeah?
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well,
I could see any of these three walking the streets of Toronto.
For different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mary Magdalene, her face looks like that because of hunger, not because of meth, but...
Different problems, different times.
Yeah, it would have absolutely blown people's minds to see stuff like that. In fact, I think people thought he was, practicing black magic or something, the fact that he had this level of technical skill. The third, so we had Brunelleschi, who started Renaissance architecture. We have Donatello, who started Renaissance sculpture. The third one is Masaccio. Now, the interesting thing about Masaccio is he only lived till he was 26.
Wow.
He didn't even make it as far as Kurt Cobain did. He's the father of what we think of as Renaissance painting. I mean, if you look at this, I think this looks like a Renaissance painting, but this was absolutely novel in his day. And Vasari, he writes a lot about the paintings of Masaccio. One of the details he brings up is nobody could paint feet like this guy could. Not something I would have noticed, but now that he mentions it, look at that.
Yeah, I never in a million. I didn't even notice, but now, now that it's said, yeah, those are some well-drawn feet.
Yep, he was commissioned to paint what was called the Brancacci Chapel, which is 100 years before the Sistine Chapel. It was one of the church's most ambitious undertakings, one of their most ambitious commissions, and it's full of paintings like this. The one on the left is Adam and Eve getting expelled from the Garden of Eden, but I mean, it just has a certain level of realism to it that, again, we're leaving the Byzantine style icons behind, and we're now having stuff that looks like not just scenes from the Bible, but real people enacting these things. The painting on the right is called The Resurrection of Theophilus, or Theophilus, however you pronounce that. So we started with those, with Pisano and Giotto, who were like the Old Testament prophets. We now had Donatello, Brunelleschi, and Masaccio, who were your King David, who set the stage. And then you have the High Renaissance. You have people like Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and those people, they'd all be topics in and of themselves. But just one of the things they were known for is just painting these just gigantic, highly detailed paintings that would take up the whole wall of a church.
Imagine being a freaking illiterate peasant and you come into church and see that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm wowed as
I know.
a jaded 21st century person.
Well, and again, art wasn't something you just did to shock people for some government grant or for some government prize. Like, just like the painting above the fireplace looked natural in context, this looks. This was part of a cultural context. This was a product of a specific time in a specific place when the church was trying to accomplish specific things.
Like stopping them darn Protestants.
Not quite yet. This was just before the High Renaissance was about 1500 to 1520. Luther was 1517. So this was immediately before Luther distracted the church and they had to stop making this beautiful stuff and move on to other things. Nothing is forever in this world. But looking at the timeline like that almost makes me appreciate this more. They wanted to do more stuff like this, but then
they had to make weapons.
Well, exactly. Well, I'm just going to say they had other priorities. This was a product of the time when the church was going out of its way to spend all of its money and treasure to make stuff like this. I could commission somebody to build a church that has a painting like this on the wall. It just wouldn't mean the same thing. At best, it would be pastiche trying to intentionally do something in the Renaissance style, and it might look nice, but this wowed people. But it still isn't called art in its day. The painter who did this, I can't remember if it was Michelangelo or Raphael who did this. The painter who did this would have still been called a craftsman or just a painter.
Yeah.
Nobody would have called this person an artist, at least at the time. But Vasari wrote this book which told this story of a couple of centuries of painting and sculpture and architecture that culminated in great works like this. And we now, at least in retrospect, call this the first great work of art history. Whatever concept that Vasari was writing about is the concept we now call art. But it still is. We still have to dig into the history in the upcoming centuries to realize why is it that when we use the word artist, we think of painters, and why is it that when we use the word artists, we look at these horrible monstrosities that we now see. So I'm going to basically end this episode here because it's been going on long enough. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at art of England and France in the Victorian age, because that's when the crux of our story happens, and it's the precursor for the 20th century when everything falls apart. But before I do that, let's just take a look at what Vasari's whole story culminates in. Culminates in this church. Just imagine walking into this place.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm going to end on this note here. This, on the left, you see a drawing from the lives of artists, and on the right, you see essentially the same drawing, but this is a painting in the house that Vasari lived in. This is called his fame chamber. Why is it called that? You see the goddess holding the trumpet at the top. That's supposed to be the personification of fame. And the three goddesses underneath fame, that's the arts of painting, sculpture, and architecture. And when I say the word arts, they are just considered a trade or a craft. But as fame blows on the trumpet, you see all of these dead artists or these dead painters, sculptors and architects coming back to life, saying that, if you are a great craftsman in one of these trades, you will live forever through your works. And even though the word art didn't exist, even though, if you went back and met Vasari and said, what do you think of these artists, he wouldn't know what you were talking about. I think this image here, it strikes a chord, and this image represents the image that later becomes known as art, and we will have to look in the next episode about why and how that happens.
I think I can tender a definition of art.
Go for it.
Art is whatever that 10% does, that top 10%, to transition to true excellence. It's the arts is...
Well, but that's virtuosity, which is important as well, but...
The main art?
Damn it. We're still going to have to dig a lot deeper, and I know we're like 2.25 hours into this, but tune in next time when we take a deeper dive to try to get to the bottom of this really elusive question.
All right, you know the drill. Like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Support us at kofi.com/Radio Free History or at subscribestar.com/radio-free-history.